So first, we were talking about UFC last week, doing a recap. This week we are doing a preview of a pay-per-view. Kamaru Usman and Leon Edwards will meet in the cage for a third time, with Edwards defending his newly acquired title that he got, knocking out Kamaru in the fifth round of a fight he was losing. Um, and that puts a really interesting spin or haze on this narrative, because there's a couple ways you can look at this. When you have a long dominant champ and everyone thinks they're a sure thing and they lose, a lot of the time they're never the same. Their age is a factor in that, and Usman checks that off. Uh, Being an athlete who relied heavily on explosiveness and athleticism, another box Usman checks, and taking head damage, which Usman definitely checks. At the same time, he's looked so much better than Edwards for like over 30 minutes of cage time between their two fights. Um, his strength and his cardio are just a two-piece combination that everyone struggled to deal with. And as he's slowly improved his technique, the wrestling was always there, but adjusting it to be more MMA and really getting more comfortable with the striking fundamentals, becoming a smoother striker to use his power, and just being more comfortable, more adept in the pocket to be able to apply that pressure that his cardio lets him do so much more safely than he could in his early days. Both those qualities were really on display in the two fights against Edwards. A much more nuanced, high-level version, less sloppy time in the second title fight as opposed to the first time they fought, but in a lot of ways still the same fight, with Edwards maybe having a few more big moments early on and gassing a little less, though being in Salt Lake City at elevation, that gassing was a huge part of the second round and part of second fight, and part of why it looked so over for Edwards until he wasn't with that head kick. And how the psychology of that head kick is going to affect Usman is going to be the really big tell for me. He was a bit slow in the first round of their second fight, feeling it out. So maybe like 2 minutes in, seeing that isn't an all-out sign that it's over, that he's a different fighter. But by the end of the second round, I'm going to be looking for him to have done that thing he's done every time against Edwards, where he waits a little, decides he can handle the power, and starts walking through, willing to eat one to give two, and turning those lands into grappling exchanges, which he stays really persistent on and does massive damage on the cardio, setting up some easier takedowns later in the fight. And then on Edwards' hand, he knows exactly what Usman does. He should know what he did wrong. He knew as soon as he walked out of that octagon that he was going to see Usman for a third time. So he's had all the time in the world to prepare to defend this title that he worked so hard to acquire and frankly got a little lucky in acquiring. So lightning doesn't strike twice. Let's see, did he rest on his laurels? Was that enough? Or is this like the moment where we start a new era where the Usman era is over for good, like we've seen with so many dominant champions who just have that narrative turn on a dime and decline? So looking forward to seeing that, and we'll have our recap for it next week.